Yay!
Hey, cool.
Slightly out of sync, but it's fine. Right, so
Right,
hello,
here we are.
Shoaib. We are here, episode 4, talking about final bosses. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, can do. So, I'm just gonna say off the bat right now that basically this might be a very Metal Gear Solid centric like day or podcast for me because I really tried to like look for some other stuff. Um, I'm you know what I even did actually? I even logged into my Xbox account, so I found like all the achievements for because I found all the achievements for PlayStation, found all the achievements for Xbox, like trophies, everything.
Mm.
And I was trying to look through my list, and I was like, which bosses like have I done? And I was like, we have to do an episode on bosses as well because it's like, that's our namesake. Um, but yeah, I basically went through everything. And every single time my mind just kept coming back to these things. Um, so I'm gonna put the different game in the middle so we have a little bit of a break from the MGS. But at the same time, no one please be surprised because I'm a big fan of that. Um, so I can't rank them. So this is in no order, but I'm gonna start with Metal Gear Solid 4.
Okay.
And it's the actual final boss. It is the actual final boss. Yeah. And the final boss is Liquid Snake. Um, so before I talk about this, how much do you know about like the Metal Gear franchise? Do you like just give me a gauge of what you know about like the bosses in general, or if you don't know anything, and whatever your knowledge is.
Nowhere as much as you, so just go on.
Okay, okay. So I think the franchise has always been very well known for like bosses and stuff like that.
Mm.
Um, and Liquid Snake is basically, I would say, the main antagonist of the whole series, right? I think anyone who plays Metal Gear is sort of like, yeah, obviously. Um, so you obviously the main character of the saga is really, I would say, well, one of them is Solid Snake, and then you have his twin, who is a clone, technically. Well, they're both clones,
Yeah.
and that's Liquid Snake. Okay, and I think the first thing I'm going to say is that the fight choreography is so amazing. Like it's immaculate. Like we're talking like Matrix level. We're talking any fight kung fu movie you can think of. Like it, the fight choreography for those 2 minutes are amazing. They have these like these the music is amazing, like they have this tribal drum like in the background. It really feels like, oh my god, they're going through like this, like they're going through like this sacred thing that like they're fighting. Um and it's done so well, and I think he's quoted as saying that he was inspired by these famous the director was inspired by these famous like fight directors and stuff like that. Obviously the director, his name is Hideo Kojima, and the thing is with Kojima is like he's a very big movie fan. He will literally watch the most random movies, and like, I think it's so cool that he's like that because you can tell like that's always been a part of his personality. So some bit of insight into him, right? Like when
Mm.
he was a kid, his parents, I don't know, I think they just believed in the power of cinema, and they would literally just like make him watch so many movies. And I think that's such a cool childhood to have as well, of like, especially back then, because he's like 60 now, right? So we're talking like 70s and like that era of like movie making. So the fact that he was exposed to so much when maybe not that many people were, I think is so cool. And he's really kept that part of his personality. And I'm saying all of that to basically say that that's still present uh, all the way to his current work on Death Stranding. But yeah, the fight choreography is amazing. And they do this really smart thing of
Mm.
like the life bar on the little screen, the life bar is like it goes through the four games. So it starts off with like the PS1 life bar. Then when you beat that segment, it goes to the Metal Gear 2 and Metal Gear 3. And it was like they changed the music along with it. It's so good, and they have references to each of them. And another thing is this, right? Is basically he Liquid Snake takes his jacket off. This is the final boss. He takes his jacket off, and they for the first time they reveal his arm, and his arm was previously cut off.
Mm.
So it just looked like someone had grafted something on, but actually, when you see it for the first time, you can actually see that it's like a biomechanical graft. So what I love about that is like you're still getting a reveal, like which is so cool. And it's like a smaller detail maybe, but the fact that they're still able to pull something off so seamlessly by something like he's taking his jacket off and it's like, oh, that's the detail of how they've grafted his arm off. Because it looked a bit let's say cartoonish in some of the old ones, but they really brought it into the real world by having this extra like mechanical type of thing.
Yeah.
So they're still revealing story elements as well. And when you win and you beat him, um, Solid Snake, he still does this thing of being very empathetic towards the villain. Like normally when someone is like when he's beaten someone and it's their final breaths, he will normally like be very empathetic towards them and sort of hear out their story. And maybe it's a little bit tropey. I get that. But it sort of matches with his character, I think. Um, and yeah, I just think it's done so well, and the voice acting is immaculate. Like there's so much going on with that part of the game, and it's basically a game at that point, which is from I think around 97 or like the 90s era, into like 2008. So like you've basically waited like a solid decade for this story to finish.
Yeah.
Then you can go into like how far the technology's advanced, like from then to there, and they tie everything together so well. So yeah, I think that would have to be, up there for me in terms of I wanted this final boss list for me to reflect something about, something to do with intelligent design or something like that. Uh, and it's a little bit annoying that I always found myself going back to things that I really enjoy because I wanted to pick something that I was like, oh, I've not played that for a while, but actually the boss fights were quite good, and it was very rare that I found a list where I was like, oh, you know what, that boss fight made me think because I think the boss fight kind of goes hand in hand with like other things. Like I'll give you an example, right? Um, Something like Prince of Persia 2008. Like that was, I considered that briefly. But the thing is, the boss fights were okay, but it wasn't like emotional in that sense. It wasn't like, oh wow, like something it moved me. It never moved me. It never felt like it was an emotional shift.
Mm.
Whereas I think with the list that I have, everything hits some kind of emotion. Um, or you want it to be clever, or you want it to be different, and some of this it was a bit like, oh, I can pick 5 games, and
Sorry.
the mechanics are cool, but are you really that different because you're sort of doing a very similar thing. And I don't think it's I don't the thing is, like, when you look at that Liquid Snake fight, it's not impossible, right? They did something as simple as changing the life bar. Like that's not really that complicated, right? But you have to have the like foresight and insight to do something like that. You have to have the intelligence as a team to
Yeah.
say, you know what, this is going to be very impactful to our audience. And that's what comes across. It's like we want to impact our audience. And I don't get that sense with some of the other games that I was looking through. Um, but yeah, definitely Metal Gear. Yeah, that's it. That's my first one. Let me know what you think.
Interesting.
It's a lot of info. I know. It's like I'm just like throwing info. It's because obviously, like I've played this, for so long, and like it's just it's something I'm so passionate about. Like yeah, it's there's so much going on with that game.
Sorry, Theron has just wandered in. Okay, he's okay.
Cameo.
Do you want to come say hello? No, he's not saying hello.
Yeah.
But anyway,
You have to pay his rate, innit?
so do you think that the impact of that is based on the fact that you've played the other games? Would that have been as impactful if that was the first one you'd played?
Yeah, I would have to agree with you a little bit because there is definitely some references there that are from past games, but at the same time, like the way the music is and the intensity of that scene by itself, I think there's a lot going for it without anything else.
Mm,
Um, and I think that goes to show a little bit by you will see that final boss on like YouTube and like the popularity of it. And I don't think necessarily everyone that watches it is a massive, massive fan. Maybe, but I would make the case that it's probably that popular also because people can just respect and enjoy the scene as it is. Like if I played it for you right now, you would, I think, just acknowledge that this is very good fight choreography.
mm,
Um, and then the second thing I would say is that if you take away all the other games and take Metal Gear 4 by itself, I think there's also a little bit of intensity from the scene before. Because the scene before, the main character like barely survives. He manages to survive and everything like that. And then it's more like they're brothers as well, right? So there's that whole element of like brotherly, like I think the story of like brotherly rivalry. I
mm.
think is so into our history, like as humans, because you can look, and this is gonna sound like why are you talking about this? But also like, you can hear the story of like Cain and Abel and be like, that is literally a story of like brotherly rivalry going as far back as like with religion, right?
Yeah.
So it's crazy to think like, and I think I'm only saying that to say that I think a story like that, I think it definitely transcends um it transcends something. I don't know what, but it transcends something because it's such a strong story, it's such a strong mythos in the human psyche, I think. Um, so I would say from that perspective as well, like you sort of look at it from like, oh, your brothers, and you're like, this is what's happening. So definitely it does stand on its own. I didn't mean to get too theological, but yeah.
No, 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 because that's what's important. Like when you're thinking about these final bosses, because I think in any game it has to kind of wrap the game up in a way that's kind of like heighten that dopamine level and makes you feel like there is a like you feel like there's some sort of ending and you've progressed and that everything that's come before
Mm,
has led you to this point and that there's some sort of reveal, so it kind of feels like it's kind of like the ending of any story because you're on a narrative journey whatever game you're playing, and you kind of need that kind of um like culmination of everything coming together. So I think you're right. There is a kind of like theological side to it, and I think that's where some bosses kind of fall short. They just completely ignore that and just think about kind of like making it super powered, and it's like, yeah, this is the boss because they're powerful, and it's like it's not that simple.
mm. Yeah, literally. You've hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, I have to say.
Do you know what? When I was thinking about this, I realized that I actually don't play a lot of games that have a final boss. I know, and
Oh, you mean like like the indie game with like Tetris Sweeper and
yeah, or
that kind of
even
thing.
because even I was thinking I play a lot of The Sims, but and I was like, could you count death as a final boss? Because I have beaten death in multiple ways. One time I was turned into a zombie, but that's not the point. I feel like he won that one, but you have to kind of like this is not the boss I'm talking about, but it's like you have to play chess against him and you have to have like a high logic skill to be able to beat him. But whether you beat him or not, the game continues. So it's like, is that a final boss? Because like, how many times can you beat him? It's no
I
final.
think okay, I think if we're putting a definition on it, I think we could say maybe like a final level as well. We can include that into the definition, or like I think whatever is before the credits as the challenge, I think could count.
Yeah,
I think it
that
could count.
that's what I was thinking. And so I was really thinking about it, and I'm going to leave my favorite one till last. But so the first one I'm going to talk about is, have you heard of My Friendly Neighborhood, the game?
I've heard of it actually. Yeah, is it the one where the people are forced to smile or something?
No, no, no. That's oh, I can't remember. Like, oh, that's the one where everyone's like, "Have you taken your joy pill?"
Yeah,
No,
yeah. I was meaning to say that actually.
it's not that one. I want to play that as well. I haven't. Well, I've seen some of it, but I haven't finished it. But
I think I have heard of it. It rings a bell. I just can't remember exactly what it is.
okay, so when you were younger, did you ever watch Sesame Street?
I can honestly say I did not.
But
I
you know what
know
it
of
is.
Sesame Street. Go
Fair
on.
enough, fair enough. Okay, so we all know that there's been like a trend in games of taking things like animatronics and puppets and basically children's toys and the things from like the areas of like the 80s and 90s that were kind of designed for children, and turning them into kind of horror games.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
FNAF, I
Yeah.
think, is the
I,
biggest example.
have you seen? They did one with Thomas the Tank Engine.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Choo Choo Charles. And then you've got like Poppy
Oh.
Playtime, and you've got the Garten of Banban. And so it's like it's a big theme, and I don't think it's going anywhere because the generation of gamers that they're really appealing to are people who lived through that era and have kind
Mm.
of they're grown up and they want and they're what they're trying to give is the same feeling, but like now you're an adult, here's an adult version of it. And I'm not going to lie, I'm surprised and I feel like I've just missed it that someone hasn't created a Mr. Blobby or Barney horror game because
Nah,
they
nah.
were
Mr. Blobby's too much.
terrifying,
No chance. No, no. I'm
absolutely
sorry. I
terrifying.
can't. I don't co-sign that. No way. No way. No
I found them
way.
terrifying as as a child, and I was just
No, not Mr. Blobby. No way.
oh, it's the way he undulated as he laughed. I was like, oh
Oh,
no,
I don't know how we got through that era of like flipping mascot.
oh I know. Um, and especially when you look at the mascots in Japan, you just think their mascots are so cool. Ours are just creepy.
I don't know. I've seen some really far out there mascots actually.
Okay,
They
yeah,
have
that's true.
something called like kawaii horror, which is like cute horror. I
Okay, yeah.
found out the other day, and I don't. You know what? I just remember thinking this is. I understand you need a different mascot for your prefecture, but I don't know if I want to see a teddy bear like cutting its own intestines out and then calling itself a mascot or something like.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
not what it was, but I'm
No,
just
I know.
saying like
Okay,
it was
yeah.
like
Those ones
it
I
was in
don't.
that
I must
realm
admit
of
I
like
don't count because they are equally terrifying. But anyway, My Friendly Neighborhood is along the same themes, but as a game, I really liked it because actually the ending, even though there were kind of like quite a few boss fights, and the bosses are like not terrifying, but more just a little bit weird. Like the final fight where you're accosted by the puppets that have kind of gone crazy with loneliness and just are genuinely insane. It's like that's quite terrifying, and it's like they are a final boss, but they're more of like a final mob boss because they all attack together, and there is a leader, equally as terrifying. And like the puppet physics make it kind of sort of funny while you're playing it, but the
it's
puppets
that
are
ragdolling.
yeah, exactly. And because they are puppets, so they are you can see that they're kind of made of fabric, and your guide through it is a sock puppet that keeps like coming through the pipes and just being like no 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 no. It's so funny, and it's like sometimes something terrifying will happen because there's a monster chasing you, or you're trying to sneak somewhere and avoid having to fight any of them. And the sock puppet will come and be like, oh yeah, I know you wanted to leave, but I can't let you do that. And it's just like, what? Why? Why are you being so irritating? And in the end, like spoiler alert, the way that it ends is like a really nice, happy ending, which is, I kind of think, rather unusual for a lot of these games. And when I say a happy ending, it's like it's a happy ending for you, the player. It's a happy ending for the puppets, the ones that aren't like murderous, and it's kind of sweet because it's the idea of you've gone to fix a radio station at this tower thing where they shouldn't be broadcasting, and it suddenly started broadcasting, so you have been told you need to go and fix it. And I think you're is it that I think it's that classic trope of like you're a couple of days from retirement, so you're just kind of like, oh, I just want to do my job, go home, and then you get stuck fighting these puppets. But you don't actually have to fight all of them. Some of them, which for me, I love games where, like, that's one of the things I really loved about Baldur's Gate. That element of I didn't always have to fight. There were lots of games where I was playing with my friend who loves fighting, and so I'd be talking to someone and they'd be off behind me, like preparing for the fight, casting spells, and then I'd be like, "Oh, it's done," and they were like, "What happened to the fight?" And I was like, "I talked us out of it." They opened the door, and they were like, "What? Why?" But that's me. If I can play, like when I played Detroit Becoming Human, complete pacifist route. If I can play a pacifist route or find a way to like, let's be friends about this. Like, come on, let's talk about this. We can work it out. Then I will definitely go that route. And I love Joyville for the fact that if you do just want to fight, there are boss fights, there are things you can fight, but at the same time, it's not what the story is really about. It's quite a moving
Mm,
story about realizing the impact that being abandoned had on the puppets who are sentient,
mm,
and just being locked in this studio world with no one. They've all gone a little bit kind of crazy, and so they're a lot of them seem like they're just trying to come and hug you, and so some of them, like, they like wrap themselves around you and you have to hit them to get them off, and then it's like ragdolling, but they're not dead. So then there's that other element of actually you're not killing anything, well, also because they're puppets and you can't kill a puppet. But it's an interesting idea of fighting, because I think there's so many games that have fighting in them where it's like you've killed it dead, and there's nothing wrong with that because I feel like there's a place for that in every game. But it's an interesting idea to have a game where it's kind of like not everybody is a villain, and you've got to try and decipher through kind of like discussion. Are we fighting, or am I helping you? Or like there's a bird that keeps attacking you at some point in the game. It's like a giant version of Big Bird, and it turns out, another spoiler, that it just can't see because it's lost its glasses.
this is the same game, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so you end up giving it its glasses back, and then it's like really affectionate towards you and really nice, and then just wanders around the compound doing its own thing. And it's no longer a threat to you, but before it was scared because it had no vision at all.
Can
And
I ask a question?
yeah.
Is there a way that you could not give the glasses the whole game to that bird, and then that bird will just keep attacking you? Or does it come to a natural point where you just give the glasses?
Oh no, you could definitely not give the glasses to the bird. It's because it's one of those things that there's final bosses in each section. So you can get through the
Mm,
sections without doing that. And the bird, I don't think the bird is one of the final bosses, because there are lots of things you can miss in the game and then go back afterwards. Because then
right.
I watch playthroughs and I read like things about it, and I was like, oh, I missed that. I didn't do that. I didn't actually meet that person because I didn't go into that building, because I looked at it and I thought, I'm not going in there. That's dark. It's like that you won't find me
You
in
know,
there
there,
at all.
there's two things that
Mm.
I want to just pick up on if that's cool. Is
Yep.
basically, I think games where they offer you that choice of like that, it makes it so much more impactful. Um, and the one thing I would want, this is going to seem so random, but like Last of Us 2, I think if they had a pacifist route, it's a zombie game, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
if they had some kind of, because you have obviously the zombies, but you have the
Mhm.
humans as well. And I'm not gonna get into it too much, but like the whole revenge arc and everything, like she's out for revenge. But I think if they did give a pacifist route and did give like some kind of primitive blow darts, it would have made that game infinitely better. Like to your point, like I think when you get those kind of choices in games, it makes them you feel a part of that a bit more. And I think that's one thing, the area that they got let down on, because it's like you're forced into an aggression route, but then the ending you're forced into a pacifist route. So it's like it doesn't align. Whereas I think they should have had two endings, and then also just from like what I was saying earlier about the final fight of with Liquid Snake.
Yeah.
I know a lot of games do a one-on-one kind of battle, but I feel like because Neil Druckmann, the director, he himself said that Metal Gear was a bit of an inspiration for him. And you
Mm.
could very much see that in the final fight of Last of Us 2 as well. So you can just see how, like, you know, that kind of impact that it's had across so much gaming, with the way that they set up the final fights. Um, but yeah, I just thought I'd just add that in there with what you're saying about the pacifism and like choices.
No, I totally agree, and I think it speaks to um what we were talking about. Was it in the first episode where we were discussing oh, is it the quarry? No, it's the one before the quarry.
Could have been the indie game episode.
No, it's not an indie. Is it an indie game? I don't think it is. It's the one where they have to survive through the night against the werewolves. Um, oh, I can't remember what it's called. It came Until Dawn. There we go. Yeah, because they
Oh,
have to
that one.
survive
Right,
until
right,
dawn.
right, right.
It's kind of speaks to that idea of that games are evolving, and I feel that I don't know. This is a very hot take, and I don't think it's like a blanket take either. But I feel like for games to really be immersive and to be able to be shareable, they need to have branching narratives so that I could play it, you could play it, like we could recommend it to other people, and then they could enjoy it. And I feel like there's always a place for a game that's like, this is the narrative, this is the final boss, and this is the way it will always be, but the choices you make will change the game. But I feel like those branching narrative games are probably the future of gaming, to make it, because when you're thinking about triple A games especially,
Mm,
you want money. You want as many people to buy
mm,
your game as possible and want the DLCs, want the remastered versions. And so you have to create a game that appeals to a large amount of people. And branching narratives do that. Because, like you said, I can play it and I can just say, I'm going to have the pacifist route. You can play it and play it, however you want, have all the boss fights.
mm.
And I can talk my way out of everything and never draw my weapon. And then someone else can play it and be like, you know what, I'm going to join the bad side because I don't want to be on this side. And they can completely switch around the game and be on the complete other side for the whole game. And I feel that, like, that's probably the future of triple A gaming.
I'm probably with you, maybe like 60% ish. I'm probably with you. Okay, so I'll give you an example, right?
Mm,
So like I feel like the first time you play a game, I think it depends on sort of what's going on in your life or in the world a little
mm,
bit, and I'll explain. So like when I played Metal Gear 1, like I was really young, right? So I didn't really understand too much about the world, but that game has a very strong anti-nuclear message,
yeah.
right? So you play that, that's cool. And let's just say you're a little bit older, you learn a little bit more about a country like North Korea or something like that,
Mm,
and they're like ramping up their nuclear stuff, right? And then that's in the news constantly, everything like that. You learn about it, then you replay Metal Gear 1. Now, that same nuclear message, it hits that little bit harder. And
mm,
this is where I kind of I agree, but I disagree a little bit as well, because I feel like it depends a little bit on what's going on in your life and that kind of stuff, and or what you're maybe going like, yeah, what you're going through, what the world's going through, what the director's going through. Like, I'm a big, like, when I played Death Stranding, which is Hideo Kojima's
Yeah.
first game after Metal Gear, um, I looked at it at the lens of like what was going on in his life, right? Because I think it's a bit allegorical of like he left the company, these people are after him, and like you can probably see tiny elements of that in the game.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of that kind of stuff that you can extrapolate from it because I think everyone can take a little bit of a different meaning from something like that. And then you've got something like Final Fantasy or like romance games. And if you're going through a breakup, you're going to take that completely different to if you're married. Do you know what I mean? So the canon thing might be the same, but I think you can take it slightly differently. And then the other thing I will say is that I do like when like a community rallies around like a game. So like you're seeing a lot of that with like Final Fantasy Rebirth, which is
Mm.
part two of the remake series. And you're seeing a lot of like everyone's on one story. It's almost like a movie. So I hear what you're saying about like having those unique experiences and like I think there's definitely a place for it, but I think there's also a place for the other stuff as well. And I don't think it's necessarily, even if you it's a linear game, I don't know if it's necessarily a linear experience. And I think that goes to say something about um game companies are getting more intelligent on how they present those linear experiences. So like God of War, you can just go through the main story and then that's basically that, right? Or you can do any side quest in any order, but like that could potentially make you feel a different way about the overall story. So it's kind of a yes no type of answer for me.
See, that's interesting because I feel like everything you said would advocate for branching narratives because
You think
depending on where you are in life depends on how you'll play the game.
yeah, that's true as well. Yeah.
And so a branching narrative will give you the result based on your own actions and feelings and is more realistic in the sense of you can act the way you would act in sense of how you feel, like you said, instead of like going on a revenge arc just because the game is pushing you that way. When you're feeling like, you know what, I
Mm.
don't feel vengeful today, I feel quite passive, I'm gonna let you go. And so I and then the community thing, I would argue that actually when there are different endings or different side quests, even where like the narrative is linear but the way that you get there is branching, the community is actually stronger because then you have people saying, oh, did you find this, or have you been here, or did you find this secret thing?
Mm.
And so then people want to share it. There's a community around kind of like wanting to guide each other, and it becomes more than just a kind of like fan community and more like a kind of like a little sibling family where everyone's like, oh, have you found this? It's like, come, let me guide you, let me show you this cool thing. It's like, I really want you to find it. And it's like that is quite beautiful. I will talk about that more when I talk about the next boss I'm going to talk about, but you go
I'm
first.
gonna stay with. I can see how you can incorporate stuff like that in future games,
Mm.
but I don't know. There's something about a singular story that I just really like. I think I'm that kind of person that I don't like making choices. I'm just like, don't give me choices. Just let me have that experience, and maybe one or two choices I can handle, but you know, you're making me plan my whole day. I can't do it. It's a lot. Um, shall I go, or do you want to go for your next one?
I might go for my next one because this is a good segue into it. Because actually,
Go
all
on.
of this talk has made me think of. So the next boss I was going to talk about is: have you played Goat Simulator 3?
I know of Goat Simulator. I think it's funny, and I'm sure there's a lot of playtime in there. However, I have not. I have not played the Goat Simulator.
Okay, so for anyone watching the podcast that hasn't played Goat Simulator is a weird and wacky game that kind of gained fame because it was like quite broken but in a really fun way, and it kind of became the mechanics of the game, and like the ragdoll of the goat is quite hilarious, and you basically play the whole game as a goat, licking things and mostly causing destruction, but also weirdly doing other stuff like going to space. And then Goat Simulator 3 is actually the second game in the franchise because the studio is quite creative about everything they do, and so they wanted to call it, I think they wanted to call it, some of them wanted to call it 2 and some of them wanted to call it 4. So they, in the middle ground, this apparently, I read this, they called it 3 instead. But it is the second game. But
Oh,
yeah, so Goat Simulator 3, the final boss, spoiler, is the farmer. And like that whole game is just a beautiful love letter to every other game that you can imagine. There is some sort of kind of reference to other games in it, or like other literature as well, because there's a bit where you have to find the One Ring and the Hobbit hole and like throw it into the lava, and then you get the Eye of Sauron on your back that just whispers weird things to you and allows you to go through this portal. And it's a fantastic
that sounds
game.
kind of good, actually.
It actually has a storyline that you're following and trying to do, and then lots of side quests. It's, yeah, it's not what you'd expect from it, but I absolutely adore it. And there is a final boss, and even though you can get there however you want, and you can like dress up your goat, and you can even not be a goat in this one. You can be a rhino, you can be a banana, um you can actually be a human, um you can be a pig. Oh, what's the other one? Oh, you can be a giraffe. I kept phasing through the ceilings though whenever I was a giraffe because I was too tall. And you have the same hitbox as when you're a goat. So you get hit by a car and the giraffe just crumples to the ground, sadly. Um, so, and oh, and you can be a fish, which is the most ridiculous thing because you're literally a fish out of water. So you're on your side, just flopping around, trying to get everywhere. It's so funny. But the final boss is the farmer, and the way they did the boss fight is really quite. It's really quite. I think it was clever because the way they did it is that you arrive. Spoiler. And the farmer hasn't finished the game, and he's like, I haven't finished the game, you need to get out of here. And then you just start destroying things, so then you have to fight him, and then you start breaking the servers and breaking the game, and so the game starts disintegrating around you, and you
The
start to,
farmer is known as also the game designer.
yes. And then you escape from the
Okay.
computer, start destroying the server, and then the world starts to crumble around you, and you start destroying like assets. Like, you know, if you've ever made a game, the basic assets where there's no texture on it and it's just a grey wall that you've
Yeah,
put
yeah,
up. And so
yeah,
that's
yeah,
the way the final boss fight is, and there's lots of bits of it. So there's a bit where I cannot remember the driving game where it's kind of like Tron, but you're in a car and you're driving through like tunnels and it's twisting, and that's one of the elements of trying to get out of the server as it's destroyed.
yeah.
And then and then the game ends how the game starts. So you start off with like a Skyrim, and I'm sure it's Skyrim where it's like, oh, you're finally awake.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
ends, so the farmer's driving you and it's like, oh, you're finally awake. After you've like set up your character, because you can choose like your color and how long your tongue is and like what horns you have, and each horn, because there was a while where I was walking around with like a lightsaber, but it meant every time I turned my head I hit everything. um but that's how the game starts, and the game ends with you driving the cart and the farmer in the back, and everything's sort of glitching because you've broken the game. And so some of the textures, it's so clever, but then it's like it's a final boss, but then you can still play the game afterwards because there's like group games you can play. Like there's a hide and seek game that's like prop hunt. There's a football game. There's a King of the Hill game that you have to have friends that playing it to play with. I played a couple of them. They're quite fun, but I just thought it was a really clever boss fight in the sense of that it culminated in everything you'd learned, and like all of the techniques that you had, you could use any of the kind of like accessories that you'd found that did things like the laser eyes, and and the lance from the knight, or the wings that allow you to fly, or the boots that allow you to jump, or the ones that it make it so you're stilts. And you don't have to play it as Filgor, which is the name of the goat. Um, you don't have to play it as her. You can play it as any creature you want, and it's that for me, it's that freedom to be kind of like, I'm going to choose my weapons of choice, and I'm also going to play it in the way that I want. And it's like, yes, there's a clear goal, but and then like the cleverness of having it be like an unfinished level, and
Mm.
and it's just like, but this probably took just as much time as a finished boss fight because it had to be winnable, it had to work, and it's just, oh, I think it's just so clever, and kind of unexpected because I did not expect the farmer to be the final boss because I didn't watch any spoilers before I played it. I didn't even watch anyone else play it. I literally played it myself for the first time and I had a great time.
So I got a question. Is the
hmm
farmer in the narrative at all until the end, or is he just like sprung at you at the end?
So he's in the beginning because he's the one that brings you there, and he's telling
Right.
you. And also, I got a trophy that I didn't intend to. Where when you're in the car and he's like, oh, you're finally awake. He's driving you to his farm, telling you about how you're gonna make him lots of money, and that he's heard so much about you, and that's why he's brought you here. Because he's like, oh, you're gonna be the most famous goat, and I'm gonna be rich, and you get an achievement for listening to his whole speech because you can skip it at any time. And so there is like a narrative there. And he's like around the farm, but you've kind of wandered off and you're doing your own thing for most of it.
Right.
Um, so you're aware he exists, but you also have your own goat castle, which, why question it in your goat tower, where you every time you achieve something, it furnishes the goat castle with people or things. So you can kind of, so there's a
Yeah.
way to map your progress. And I think like mapping your progress in a way that isn't just, oh, you got a trophy, now you move to the next chapter, but actually being able to go into the goat castle, because the first time you go in it's complete shambles, there's rubble everywhere, and you clean it up, and like slowly it becomes like a castle, and then there's a DJ deck in there, and then the music changes and you've got statues, and like it slowly evolves into like, oh, I'm getting better at this game, and like, oh, I've opened that door and now I can go through there, and I've opened that door and now there's a map upstairs that shows that I connected the Wi-Fi towers, which I can't remember what that actually does.
Yeah, I love games that like subvert your expectation a little bit, and even that sounds like such intelligent design, um, because it's managed to basically pull off both. Because I
Yes.
think, you can be like a sort of parody game like that, and there's nothing to say like there's just because you're a parody game or like a funny game or something like that, that the people who made it aren't incredibly talented just because like you're having a lot of laughs. And I love that they added something like that in because they just wanted to clearly say, actually, we can flex our design muscles if we want to as well. So that's definitely really, I like hearing of that. Yeah.
But yeah, that's all I have to say about Goat Simulator for today. And now I kind of want to play it because DLC came out a while ago, and I haven't. I've tried not to see any spoilers, but I haven't played it yet.
Maybe I'll watch a few clips on YouTube or something. I do like watching people react to that kind of stuff. Um, cool. So I'll go for my next one.
hmm
Um, so my next one is gonna be Devil May Cry, and we can say either five or three because the character is reoccurring mainly in both of those games,
Okay,
and the character is Virgil. So, how much do you
Virgil.
know about Devil May Cry?
A little bit. I feel like that sounds familiar.
Virgil.
Ah, yes, yes, yes. I've heard of him from you. Right, go on.
From me? Oh man. Um, damn, that must be some conversations a while ago. I
Yeah.
don't think we've spoken about him on here yet.
No.
Okay, so Virgil, I think he's such an intense character, but I'm gonna start with It's so hard to know where to begin with this kind of stuff because there's so much going for those characters. So he's introduced in Devil May Cry 3.
Hmm.
He is again a twin brother. But you know what? I'm gonna say something actually. Like Devil May Cry, the director has been on record for saying that he always wanted there to be some elements of family there. So the first game is very much about like lineage and the history of his father and that kind of stuff. And I think he was saying that when there's family bonds, it makes the story like more intense. Something along those kind of lines. I can't remember exactly. So in every game, like you'll sort of, apart from two, I think, you'll always sort of see that kind of familial element present. Um, like firstly, as a fight, Virgil is like he's very much like a skill check. Like it's verifying that you've actually can implement everything you've learned. And he's such a great villain for Dante because I think he's so opposite from what Dante is, and it's so hard to put this into words actually. Um, I think we'll when you look at his design, even like, and again, like I've spoken this in so many podcasts now, but like design and artwork is so integral to how I view a game. And his design is like in both of the games in 3 and 5 is like immaculate. Um, I don't even I honestly I'm trying to find the words. Like it's so hard. Um, okay, let's say this, right? So you got Virgil, and I think the series themselves, they know how much of an important villain he is
Mm.
because you have the original series like Devil May Cry 1 to 5, right? But then you also have Devil May Cry, which is basically a separate singular game. There's one game which is DMC Devil May Cry. A lot of the fans do not like this game. I think the mechanics are good, but they should not have called it Devil May Cry, which is why the fans have affectionately named, instead of saying Dante, they call him Dante or Do Not Tay or something like that. Dante, because he's not really the Dante that we all know and love.
Mm.
But the reason I bring up this other game is because Virgil is also in that game. And I think they do a really good job of doing like a character study on him in one of the DLCs. They do a whole like 4 or 5 hours just on that character alone, which is really interesting to like delve into his like psyche and everything like that. Um, and then all he's still in that game. And the point I'm trying to make is however you feel about that game, it definitely highlights how important Virgil is to the entire story of Devil May Cry because you cannot make a reboot, which is what it was. It was a reboot
Mm.
without having that character in some way,
Yeah.
even as far how far you departed from it. Um, I think also like he challenges Dante in such a way that it verifies a lot of Dante's beliefs in morality. So you sort of see that whole aspect of like Virgil wants more power. He wants more from life, and
Yeah.
Dante is like the type of person who is sort of like I'm happy with life. Um, but every time you face him, you have to face that question again: is like, do you want more out of life, or can you be content from life? And I think Dante's position is kind of a little bit better because Virgil is always sort of stressing about how to be more. And it's like, when you're that powerful already, how much more do you really need? It's almost like the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire. Like, how much do you really need? Do you need the B? Probably not. Um, so yeah, I think there's sort of that whole aspect of it. And then they really deepened his lore in like number 5.
Mm.
I won't go into it too much because I don't want to spoil it. Um, but yeah, like Virgil, again, it's that whole brotherly dynamic because again they're twins, and I, I don't want to sound like a parrot, but when you see those kind of, and I think it goes to show like if you can establish like a strong relationship, it doesn't need to be brothers necessarily. And I think my next boss will sort of show that a little bit more, is
Mm.
that if you can establish a strong connection between the protagonist and antagonist, then what you yield in the end is like much more impactful. Um, and also like with number five, they did some really interesting stuff. They did a version of like level two where you can basically, if you beat the boss on that level, the credits will roll. So you can literally beat the game within like 2.5 levels or something like that. Um, so they did some really interesting stuff there. But yeah, it's so interesting to try and utilize all those skills that you've got from the main game into that fight. And the music is so amazing. And I'm gonna throw a little bit of a spoiler in and say like, you know, there's another character called Nero, and then he has a fight with Virgil as well. And like again, it's that emotional, they put so much emotion behind it. In fact, Nero calls his on the second to last level, I think on the last level,
Mm.
Nero has a block. He has a block against fully embracing his demonic side, let's say. Um, but they use their Dante and Nero use the devil within as like to help the world, right? So it's not embracing the devil in like we're gonna kill everyone, right? That's
Yeah.
Virgil, okay? Um, but he has a call with his girlfriend Kyrie and is basically trying to explain how he didn't have a father and like how like it's this whole like they spend a whole like I'm sure it's like 5 minutes. Doesn't sound long, but because of the intensity of that conversation and then going into like the final boss, it really hits you. You really feel that. And like, you know, they did such a good job of imbuing that whole segment with emotion from, you got the emotion from the side of like a twin, and then you have the emotion from the side of like how Nero's feeling. So, I think it's not just a skill check. It's like an emotion check as well. You're just like, are you feeling what these characters are feeling? Because maybe if you're not, and we're at the ending, then we failed as a game. But I would challenge anyone to play the entire game and hear that last monologue and feel like you can't relate to how they're feeling. It's really hard to not feel that.
Mm.
So yeah, it's like a masterfully done arc, and it culminates in this really beautiful like send off. And honestly, like I'm counting the days down till they do number six because the way how well this was written, it was so good. And then you get the sense that Virgil has had such a interesting arc of like he was a villain and then now he's maybe not a villain, and like he's got all these other emotions. And like if they make another game, because they did a DLC with him and they added like an extra 2 minutes of an ending,
Mm.
and you get a little bit of insight on how Dante and Virgil saw their parents. And it's so interesting because Dante's always been a good character, right? So when you hear how he feels about his parents, it's a bit like, okay, I kind of expect that from you. But whenever you hear Virgil talk about the parents, you're like, whoa, this is extra interesting because you've been a villain for so long and now you're opening up more. So it adds that extra layer. So
Mm.
yeah, I think I would say my it's the ones that all like of all of everything that stands out to me, it's that emotional piece. Like, you can be, and in fact, throughout Devil May Cry 5, you do beat a bunch of bosses, but it's hard for me to say like, oh, this boss was really good. Because they have some like empty shell bosses where they're like, they have some kind of power and that's why you're fighting them.
Yeah.
But there's a few bosses in there that I can tell you straight off the bat, Lady, Trish, and then Virgil, like there's some kind of connection there, right? And that's what makes it much more intense as a boss battle. It's not just that, oh, I was better than you and I beat you. It was like, but what does that mean for the characters? Because it's very clear that you're trying to send me an emotional message, and I want to take that message, decipher it, and see what it means. And I think the emotions are strongest with Virgil for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, all my stuff is about emotions basically. Like I think I think it's just, you know, it's so nice to just know that anytime you want to feel a bit empathetic, you can basically switch on one of these games and like learn a little bit of empathy, because I think, in the real world, I think your empathy only goes so far because, someone messed up your coffee and like that's kind of it, right? Or like maybe a few more intense things, but you'll never get the chance to like show empathy to a level where it's like, oh, my brother's betrayed me and literally ripped my arm off. And like, what does empathy feel in that scenario? And it's like, it sounds so like not superficial, but it sounds so like fantasy, right? But that's why we play them, because we want to indulge in those fantasies and see what those fantastical emotions might be like as well.
Hmm.
Or that's what I think, anyways.
Yeah, I feel like that's a whole nother episode. Why do we play games?
Yeah. But yeah, that's all I got to say on DMC5, and I'm waiting, and my wife is waiting now as well because she's into games. She is learning the art of waiting multiple years for games
Well,
and
when's it?
just living with your life while you wait for them to just magically appear one day.
When's it due to come out, or is it just
I mean,
coming soon?
no announcements, but I think Devil May Cry 5 sold really well, and it had a great they knew they had something special.
Yeah.
Like they knew they were doing something for the fans because they went back to the original series after a reboot. So they knew the reboot wasn't doing very well. So it was made specifically for the fans. He came out on the first announcement saying it was for the fans. I think it came out around late 2019, something like that. Um, and then they did the special edition already, which is like a staple of Devil May Cry. They always make like a special edition where Virgil is playable.
Hmm. Oh,
Um,
cool.
so they've done that already. That was in 2020, I think. So that means we are 4 years in with no announcements. Yeah, but you know what? I, I don't mind waiting, but I think Capcom have learned something from too many games, because I think they spent 2010s basically doing like multiple Street Fighters, multiple Marvel vs. Capcoms, and they were in a very big issue of basically oversaturating the market. They basically flooded their own market with a bunch of their games. And I think you can sort of see that now that they've really taken on board those lessons, because I feel like they've spaced out their games really well, and that includes other franchises like Resident Evil, like um, Street Fighter, like um, they have a hunting. I can't remember, Monster Hunter. All of these games are like Capcom games, but they've all been very spaced out in a very intelligent way. So I think they've definitely learned, which is probably also why they haven't done an announcement for Devil May Cry 6, because they don't want to they don't want to get ahead of anything. And the way they announced 5 and they did it in that kind of way, I think it was done really masterfully. So as much as I don't like waiting, I think they're doing it in the right way. I don't know if my wife will agree, but there you go.
But I think because she's slightly newer to gaming culture, you kind of get used to it. You kind of just
It's so funny because we just completed Final Fantasy Rebirth. So there's I think there's at least two games that we completed as soon as they came out. which was God of War Ragnarok,
Mm.
which I think came out in December last year, and then Final Fantasy Rebirth, which literally came out like a month ago. And those games are like minimum 3 year wait. so, so she's just there now, like, anytime like an advert comes across for Devil May Cry, it's like, are we still waiting for that? Have we had anything yet? Do we know anything? And it's like, no, we literally don't know anything apart from rampant rumors and theory and speculation. I mean, I can tell you some of the speculation, but it literally doesn't mean anything. So she's definitely having a lot of fun with that.
Oh.
I know it's funny, right? Um, yeah. What's your next boss?
So I this is my final boss. So I've spoken about this game. I don't know if I've spoken about it on stream. So this game is called The Tale of the Extended Warranty. It is a free indie pixel game, and I absolutely adore it because I just think it's so clever and it's so relatable. Because basically, the whole game is that you have gone to an electronics store. You've decided, I can't remember why you decide, you are either not ready or you don't want to buy anything, and you attempt to leave. You are then accosted by a staff member who is then like, oh, would you, oh no, you do buy something, I think, and they're like, oh, would you like an extended warranty? And you say, no. And the whole game is them throwing, I think, the extended warranties at you, and you throwing the word no back at them. And that's the whole game. And at the end, one of them is like, oh, let me get the manager. And so like you're going through levels of like the chains of command, and eventually the final boss is the manager who comes and it's like, no, you really want the extended warranty? And it's like, no, no, I don't. And it's just kind of like, I find it so relatable in terms of, I'm not going to lie, I love insuring things. I love that security, that safety net of being like, I paid for you to be
Mm.
insured and now you're broken, don't worry, there's a place for you. Like when
Yeah,
my,
yeah.
like there was one day I came home and my PlayStation button had been smashed in, and I have no idea how it happened because I wasn't home. I didn't have Theron at that time, so there was nobody home. It was by itself. Nothing had fallen over. I went to press it, and the button was literally smashed into the PlayStation. I was like, what? And so it was insured. So I sent it off, and they were like, "Yeah, you've just smashed the button in. What were you doing?" I was like, I wasn't even here." And so they just replaced the button. But it was that freedom of knowing that they paid for the postage and packaging for it to be collected and for it to be returned. I didn't have to pay anything for the button, and it was just it was nice to know that I was sending it off somewhere where they were going to like do something nice with it. And even when it came back, it had a little sticker saying this works, and it was just something quite satisfying about that, and not having to think, oh, I'm going to have to try and find somewhere to replace it, because like now if there's anything wrong with the button, I've also got somewhere to go back to, because it's like, I paid my insurance, you did this. And they were brilliant. They were really like communicative, because they told me when it got there, they told me when they started working on it, they told me when they fixed it, and then they told me when they sent it back. So I felt like while my PS4 was on holiday, I was like, oh, where's my baby? There it is. It's fine, it's coming soon. And it was quite nice. And so I do believe in insurance, and I think it's very important, but I feel like many people have gone to the shop and bought something, and someone's been like, oh, would you like this deal, or would you like to buy this extra thing, or would you like this game with it? And you've been like, no. And they're like, oh, but did you know, just for today? No, I don't want it. Leave me alone. And then they
Oh
and then
man.
they hold all the power, because it's like, I'm not going to check you out until I've done the spiel. And I appreciate it's their job. They've got to do it. They've got to try and sell it. They've got to try their hardest with each person, because they might convince you. You never know. But you've all had that feeling where you're just like, no, 1,000 times no, and let me leave. But like, put the order through, give me my receipt, let me walk out the door with it. I am happy with the choices I've made. And so that game was just, it's a short game. It's pixelated, top down, and actually you can move around, but you're in one general spot because you're in the store trying to get to the door, so you'll just come from the till to the door. And it's like it's such a short journey that feels so long because you're fighting off all these people who are like extended warranty, extended warranty. And it's like it can feel like that, so especially because I'm more a bit more introverted, and so going outside anyway and having to speak to someone, it's like sometimes I don't have the energy for it. And so the idea of having like to talk to all these people is like I can relate to this because I would be like, no, 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 let me get to the door. This journey
Okay,
has become so
I got a
long.
question. I got a question. I got a
Yeah,
question. I want a spoiler. I would like a spoiler.
yeah.
How does it end with the manager? How does it end? Like, do you?
So you actually get like power ups where you can like do like a burst of colorful nose that hit them all at once, and they just get knocked back. So again, you're not in another game where you're not killing anyone. You're just kind of like throwing no at them to be like a final no, go away. And so the boss has like super moves, and it's whereas with the other bits of the game, you're fighting all the employees kind of simultaneously. With the boss, it's like you're just fighting him, but he has like power up moves, and you've got to like avoid the things he's
What is this
throwing at
power
you.
up move? You're gonna break it.
Oh no, the power. I think the power up move is like, is it insurance with the extended warranty? I can't remember. I haven't played it in such a long time, but
That's
it's like
so
I
funny. I love
always
that.
remember it, and that made me think, oh, I kind of want to go play it again. And it's nice because it is such a short game and it's play in browser, so you just pop on the computer, you play it, and it's such a wonderful game. And I love indie games, so I love supporting anyone. And I actually played it when it came out because I'm always on itch looking to see what's new. And I love an alternative narrative, or an alternative game in any way. Um, and then even like the way the screen is set up at the top of the screen, I can't remember which side it's on, you have your special bar as it builds up, but you also have a patience bar instead of a life bar. So like if you get hit, your patience starts going down. And I think it's such a clever and like detail of like changing it from like you're fighting them to no, your patience is being worn away, and if your patience goes down to zero, I'm assuming you just like buy the warranty so you could leave. But
Yeah, we've all definitely been in that situation more than once.
and I think that's why I would actually rate this as my favorite boss ever, because it's just so relatable to me, and so kind of such a simple game mechanic, and fairly understandable, at least for like Western culture. Definitely, I can't say for other cultures, that that
Mm.
idea of like not even just like extended warranty, but going to any shop and buying something and like having to like fight off the no's. It's like there's nothing that distresses me more than when you go to a shop and like multiple people keep asking you, oh, what are you looking for? Have you heard about this deal? And it's just like, I just want to shop and be left alone, please. It's like I get that they're trying to be friendly, but I find it really overwhelming. But yeah, best
Yeah, I might
boss
have to
ever.
watch that on YouTube or something. That sounds pretty funny, to be fair.
You could play it. It's like 3 minutes. Well, you do
Oh,
it in
three
three
minutes. Oh, and
minutes.
like, I don't know. I've lived my life selling too much warranty, so I think I might have had the real experience for too long.
No, it's literally a very short game. There aren't that many waves. It's designed to be kind of fun and short, but you can actually watch the gameplay on their
I'll
YouTube
probably just
channel.
save. I'll probably just buy the warranty straight away. First person asks me, I'm like, yep. Now leave me alone. Cool. I'll go on to my last one then.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to break it up. I'm trying to break it up with the metal, like so it's not non-stop Metal Gear, but maybe I've failed. Uh, so my last boss is it's Actually, wait, I'm trying to think if I have any more thoughts to add on what you like your game thing, like your what was it called again?
The Tale of the Extended Warranty.
Tale of the Extended Warranty.
I will put the link in the description once this goes live on YouTube, in case anyone
You
would like
know,
to play it.
I think the only thing I'd really like to add is that, and I think I've said it already with one of your other games, is having a unique experience is cool. Like when they've done something, because I don't think it takes necessarily moving the earth. And actually, your game very much echoes what I said about Metal Gear 4 with changing the life bar. Like,
Mm,
it doesn't need to be a big thing. It can just be like you're shifting from talking to a bunch of people to talking to the manager. But it's that extra layer of thought, it's that level of thoughtfulness that really impacts how you're going to see something. So I like that they did that. I think that's pretty cool.
yeah, I think also it speaks to your point about not every game has to have a branching narrative, because that one doesn't. Every time you play it, it's the exact
Yeah.
same ending, and actually, um, you get the experience, you get to embody that kind of that a specific narrative, that specific feeling of like losing your patience because of like everything,
Yeah.
and so it speaks to that point that you were making.
Yeah. And I think actually it links up to something else I was saying, which is emotions. Like everyone's felt the emotions of like needing to say no or like wanting to be an introvert. So like it's funny how the things that we've picked, I think whether you realize it or not, like a lot of those through lines are the same in a lot of these things.
Mm,
And I don't think it necessarily just means that it must be AAA for those feelings to be there. I think if you're thoughtful enough, you find a way to do those elements where you can.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's a good thing to add on. But now I'll move on to my last one. So my last one is, as I've said before, Metal Gear Solid again, but this time it's Metal Gear Solid 3. And it is the actual final boss of the second to last boss, but you could call it the final boss.
Mm.
And the name of the final boss is the boss. Okay. Yeah, I know it sounds kind of weird, but also like it really just sounds like her name to me. Like it doesn't like when you play the games, like it's when if you said, "Oh, you're fighting the boss," it sounds like saying Joanne or something like that. It just
Yeah.
sounds like her name. Do you know what I mean? Um, so you know, again, like spoilers if you somehow haven't managed to play these games, but like there's in this number three, it's like a prequel, right? So you go back into the 60s and you are now playing as Big Boss. Oh yeah, there's another character named Boss. Um, so you're now playing as Big Boss, who is also known as Naked Snake,
Okay.
who is also known as the technical father of Solid Snake from the number four. It's a very complicated storyline, which is another reason why I like it, okay? Because it doesn't baby you. It assumes you have the intelligence to follow it, and
Mm.
that's actually I feel like a very strong point for Metal Gear. But that's like a side, that's a whole nother thing. Um, so you're playing as Naked Snake. Your mentor, she is known as the boss. Okay, so she's the mentor character. She basically fought in World War II. She had a elite unit that she was basically in charge of, and then you were like one of her final like mentees, like she was your mentor, right? And so the story transpires, she basically like has to jump side. This is now like Cold War era, so I think maybe like 60s or something like that. So she's now like jumping sides. And the thing is, what's really interesting is between her and Naked Snake, the mentee,
Mm.
I don't know if it was a bad translation, but at one point it's basically like someone is asking Naked Snake, like, what is your relationship to the boss? And she basically says, was she just a teacher? And he was like, no, it's like deeper than that. And you would think that the next question would be like a mother because it feels like there's an age gap,
Mm.
or that's how it felt to me. But then the next question was like, was she a lover? And he said, no, it's deeper than that. So you don't really quite fully grasp like the relationship because it's, you know, that it's not like just a teacher relationship, but then he never acts like he's her lover either. But
Mm.
then he's also already stated that it's a deeper relationship than a lover. So you're constantly trying to understand like what does that mean? Like being deeper than a lover, but then also being deeper than a teacher, but also it's like it's very non-sexual, or that's how it's coming across,
Mm.
right? Um, so like, but this is what I'm talking about, like final bosses and having this very personal connection. I think it heightens your feelings during that moment. So there's that whole element to it. Um, and then you've got basically, I think Hideo Kojima, again, the director, I don't think he's the only sole writer of these characters. I'm sure he has other people that also help him.
Mm.
I know he's got like a art director he's basically worked with even now. Like they left the Konami studio together, and when making Death Stranding, that art director is literally helping him make those new character designs.
Yeah.
So you can really see how trying to need some water, but you can really see how like how he has a lot of collaborative efforts with everything he does. So I'm sure he's not the like singular writer to this, but I think I would ascribe a lot of it to being his vision. And the reason I'm basically saying a lot of this is because I think that he knows how to write very interesting like female characters. And I wanted to bring this up because I had this long conversation with my wife about. I'd love to know your thoughts about this, right? I don't think it's necessarily controversial, um, but like, yeah. So I feel like he does a lot. He's, a lot of what he makes, I'm sure, is very collaborative, but I think it is his vision. And when you look at how he wrote the boss and her character arc and everything like that, I think it's done so intelligently, so well, and in such a way that you feel like you can connect to this character. And I don't think it's like necessarily like a fluke, because when you look at a game like Death Stranding, for me, one of my favorite characters from that game was the character Mama.
Mm.
And again, she has this whole thing of like she has a twin, and then they sort of go through this thing with a pregnancy, and like there's a bunch of like there's you good.
Yeah, sorry. The other one crying.
Hey, there's the cameo.
Right, go on.
Um, so yeah, like in Death Stranding, like the character Mama is so interesting to me, and then you got the character Fragile. Like,
Yes, that's
it's
who
the
I was
way he
thinking
writes.
of when you were talking.
Yeah, it's the way he writes these characters, and I think it's so intelligently done. And again, I don't want to give him all the credit, but I'm just saying like it's his vision, right? And I think that's so cool that he's able to pull it off like that. And the thing I wanted to add about this is not just about him writing these characters, but I think it's also this, right? Like, which is, I think, a lot of people complain about how some of these characters are written. And I don't want to take away anything from those complaints,
Mm.
but I think also like there's a bit where you can sort of say where the stories I want to partake in, how are they even written at all? Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
to me, I was getting that experience of really well written like female characters or characters in general from him. So where you get to select, like I think you get to also select what you want to partake in.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, and I think that deserves its own set of accolades for him, because I'm sitting there and you're getting such a diverse cast and so intelligently written. And I think like that's me sort of being a savvy consumer of like, well, I want to partake in those kind of characters as well that are really smartly and well written. Um, what are your thoughts on that? I wonder.
No, I totally agree. And I think that also it's it's always interesting. I think I spoke about it in the episode where I was speaking about one of the final bosses in Spyro the Sorceress, like having
Mm,
a female that doesn't present as just being like quote unquote eye candy, and like actually
yeah,
having their own narrative, their own story, and just being a person who happens to be
yeah,
a woman, as opposed to, oh, we put a woman in here because we need that kind of like softer touch. It's like, no, they're a woman and they have this personality and they just happen to be a woman because we're showing that
yeah.
it's more dynamic. And I think that he does that really, really well. And I like the fact that kind of turning it on his head, especially with Fragile, like her very name, thank you, Theron, kind of denotes that she's fragile, but then the character is very kind of strong and powerful and very
Yes.
clever and kind of tactical in a way, which is really, really interesting. And then even like the idea of the boss, which usually when, especially when you watch like older cartoons from the 90s, the big boss is usually male. And so to kind of flip that on its head and be like, oh, this is the boss, and have it be
You know,
female. It's like, what does her character look like? I've not seen her.
what's so interesting actually is that he did such a good job with the way he wrote her that basically any future achievements that is done by Naked Snake is basically you always have to look at it from the lens of, well, he learned that from the boss. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mm,
he sets up his own military base and does all this stuff, and he never really lets go of that attachment. But that also means you as the player cannot let go of that attachment. like basically you have Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, right? Which is uh chronologically set after Metal Gear Solid 3. And in Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, this is gonna sound mental, but a lot of that game is basically about AI, and they've basically managed to salvage some of the boss's brain, and it's in the AI. And he basically
interesting.
has this very like emotional reaction to hearing her voice again for the first time since he killed her.
Mm,
And you're sort of there well, yeah, of course he feels all those things, and you can never really let go of the people that made you. Um, so yeah, I think it's definitely very interesting. Um, the thing is with the boss as well, like um, as a final fight, okay. There's a few other things I wanted to add with her as well,
mm,
which is basically they show like a cesarean mark on her stomach, right? Basically, in the final fight, she's basically showing a bit more of a feminine energy that she may have never showed Naked Snake. Like it might not have crossed his mind, like you went through different pains that I will never be able to understand.
mm,
And again, it's about this way of masterfully adding a complexity of a story, even in the last moments of a game, which I think they very much achieve. Um, and also, like, okay, these three things, okay, uh, unique animations that people may never see, which I think is just amazing to put that in. And in fact, I haven't seen some of them. Okay. Like when I replay that game again, I can literally Google a different way to do it and start some of these animations I've never seen. So unique animations that you've never seen before.
mm.
Um, this actually affected my wife, yeah? Like, basically, in the middle of a cinematic, you, again, massive spoilers, I'm so sorry, but in the middle of a cinematic, you have to press square to shoot her. And the first time my wife watched it, I made her press the button. I was like, you gotta feel these emotions. Like, you can't, like, I'm not pressing that button.
Oh,
I've been through
oh,
this. I've been through this like a million times, okay? And every time it hurts me a little bit. So you gotta press, like it literally the game will stop and like it zeroes in on her, right? And um the second you shoot her, right, it's like such a like solemn bullet shot. And it's in a field of petals that are white, and every single petal turns red. Like they from where she is, they start turning red.
mm,
Because in Metal Gear there is like some supernatural elements to it,
yeah,
like that you can't fully understand, but it's almost like the world reacts to having these larger than life people, like larger than life souls, leave the world. Like, and it
yeah,
happens on some level with every boss. So like one of the first bosses you fight, no, like maybe the third boss you fight, he's like obsessed with going into space, and he turns into like a massive fireball which like explodes, but the fireball is like a face. So you're sort of yeah. Like that's a whole other thing. But like basically like you're sort of exposed to these supernatural elements, which is really bizarre because it feels like you're going through them in the 60s. It's like this is so odd because like I kind of understand it, in modern day because they put a technological twist on it. Because like
mm,
technology can basically do anything, right? But then when you're seeing something like that happen in, set in the 60s, you're a bit like, that's odd actually. Like, how has that happened? Like, it doesn't make sense. He can't become a face. But you like the game slowly sort of lets you accept it somehow. So
yeah,
by the time you get around to shooting her and you see the petals turn red, it's actually in terms of like a supernatural scale, on the scale of like a face of fire or like petals turning a different color,
yeah,
it's maybe not as crazy as that, so you sort of accept it a bit more, and it's this beautiful moment of like, how have I done this, have I done the right thing? And then the game basically near the end like switches the whole thing on your head, and it basically says like, look, what really is an enemy, and like who can really be an enemy and who is really an ally as well, because you've done this for your government. So it's all interwoven so gracefully. And again, like her character stands out amongst all of this. That's the
yeah,
thing. And I love that for a final boss is like you've had such an amazing arc. And I think that's what people really want to see. They want to see amazing characters. They want to see memorable characters. And I don't play the next game and I don't think like, oh, why is she still involved? Oh, I hate that she's still involved. No, I love that she's still involved. And 100%, a lot of his achievements should absolutely be attributed to her because he flipping taught her. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
she flipping taught him.
Yeah,
Like, she taught him. Like, so you can't have one without the other. And, I think it's such a masterclass in like, look, Solid Snake is like the final. You got Solid Snake, you've got Big Boss, and again, even his title has to be derived from her title in some way because it shows the importance of her. And then you have the boss, right? And all through these characters, ultimately, Solid Snake, you don't get Solid Snake without Big Boss, and you don't get Big Boss without the boss. So it all links in. And I think it just goes to show like everything is down to character arcs, and everything down to, really well written characters. And I just love that, that regardless of whatever happens to the franchise in the future, that's always going to be there for me. Like I'll be able to play those games and experience that, and I think that's so cool. And I'm looking forward to Delta, which she's also going to be in. And I don't care what people say. People are like commenting on the looks and all this kind of stuff. It's not really a controversy, but someone said something about the look, and the community went mental. And then someone made a really good point. It's like, this is exactly how someone would look after surviving World War II and literally doing nothing but war for most of their life. It's like they would look kind of mental. And like they've kind of done that. But honestly, me personally, I hold all judgments until I either play the game or complete the game.
Mm.
Like I can't say like, oh yeah, this is a like, especially with how much they're, you know what, that's a whole other topic. That's the end of what I have to say. But yeah, let me
Interesting.
know what you think.
I don't think I have
There's
anything
a lot.
to add other than what I said before. But it is interesting to think about how they're going to take that into the next step. And then, like he said, like then trying to show, especially now with games, trying to show the things people have been through. Um,
Mm,
because I think as games have changed in terms of like the realism that you can portray, if that's the style that you want, um, the things that you can show, like a scar. Whereas when you think of like the early PlayStation 1 games, trying to show that on a character model would have not been impossible, but extremely challenging to have that be something subtle that you just see. It would have to have been pointed out just because of the
mm,
nature of the way that the graphics were. Whereas now you can display like subtle emotions, like face ticks, because we
yeah.
have that level. If that's the kind of game you're going for, I don't feel like every game should be like that. But it's interesting when you're talking about trying to show all of that she's been through in the character model. It's like that's quite fascinating, actually.
Look, I'm gonna be really blunt, yeah. I'm gonna just say it how it is. A lot of people I think were complaining that she wasn't hot. I think that's what it was, right?
Oh,
Um,
like we
and
don't need to talk about the
and to be
toxic
honest
game
with you,
culture.
yeah, I know. And you know what? Someone said something about the character models or something like that, but actually it's a PS2 game. Like, it's really hard to know. And then someone tried to compare the concept art, something like that, right? I didn't look into it completely because I thought accusations of such, stupid things and like again, like whoever made this point was hit the nail on the head so hard. It's like she's literally been through World War. Like, what do you expect her to like? She has baggy eyes and like she has these dark circles on her eyes. It's like, well, yeah, you literally are like teaching men how to murder people, like, and you're the best at murdering. Like, that will literally affect your soul. And like you can almost see it in her eyes, like it's affected her.
Mm,
Um, and you know, you're saying like how the other thing I like to add slightly separate from this point, like how is it gonna make it look like in the future? For Metal Gear specifically, Metal Gear Solid Delta is the next game that's coming out. They've already announced it.
mm,
And it's more like a remake remaster. So her storyline is more or less completely finished in the saga. So I don't really think that you can't really do too much there. Not really. And again, I reserve all judgment until I've complete. She has one outfit change when she changes sides, and maybe one hairstyle change. So other than that, like I don't really know what I'm expecting for her looks, but I think it's more about the emotions. It's more about the voice acting because the voice acting is such a big thing. I think there's so much more things, and to be honest with you, I really respect the Metal Gear community for this because I think a lot of them knew it was baseless accusations.
mm.
And I think for at least a month solid, everyone was taking the mick out of, oh, sorry, everyone, let me try and make this not the mick. Everyone was making jokes about how ridiculous those accusations were. Because I think everyone was on the side of like, she's literally been through world wars. Like, what are you talking about? So you know what? Props to the Metal Gear community. I was really proud to be a part of that community. I was like, you know what? You lot are saying the right things right now because it doesn't quite make sense. Um,
But it's always in
yeah,
the game's
you know,
interest. Sorry, go on.
okay, Eva. Okay, before I say this, I'm gonna say one thing.
Hmm.
Metal Gear Solid 3 was sort of like James Bond-esque, okay? like think about that a little bit. It's like a bit of a James Bond type of espionage thriller. Even the song was like made to sort of be like that. Okay, I'll send it to you afterwards, and you'll kind of get what I mean. So there's a different character which is maybe more like the Bond girl,
Mm.
and her name is Eva, right? And if that character was made to be like ugly or something like that, then I'd be a bit more like, why have you done that? Like what's the design philosophy behind why you've done that? Do you get what I mean? Because I understand the design philosophy for how you've changed someone like the boss because she's been through world wars. But if there was a, which I don't, I me, the way I like to watch trailers, I watch like one or two. I tend not to want to watch two. I have a rule. I will watch one cinematic trailer. I'll watch one gameplay trailer, and then I will normally stop after that because they give too much away these days. So if they did change someone like her, like I know the original intention was to be like a Bond girl type of character, right? So I would just want to know like why has that changed and what's the philosophy? Which, because it's a different director, so you want to just understand the thought process behind that. But that would be a bit more confusing to me because that would be a bit more like you've gone like Kojima had one idea of one way and you potentially pivoted, and what's the reasoning with that? That's
Mm.
where I would feel a bit more like, okay, I don't get that. But I think they know they're being scrutinized so much that I would feel like they would have good justifications for what they've done, or I would like to think they would. So that's where I would be a bit more like that.
Okay.
Hope that makes sense.
Yes, that does make sense.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I'm looking. I can't wait for that. Honestly, I can't wait. I genuinely can't wait for that game. You know, like when they announced it, like it was genuinely like, okay, this will be the absolute last thing I say. But when they announced Metal Gear Solid Delta, I was genuinely emotional because we had no Metal Gear news, no nothing for like, I want to say 5 + 4, 9 years of like radio silence, basically. So it was definitely very emotional for, I'm more than certain, a lot of people. But that's it. I will not say anymore. I'm more than certain you've got somewhere to go. So we can end it here.
Oh, no, no, no. I was looking at the CPU temperature.
We can call it here, though. I think we've covered everything, right?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you for watching our fourth episode. We will see you next week, but just a pre warning that on the 9th, the episode will be slightly delayed as we're both not available that day. But
Or
we
maybe special episode.
Ooh.
Ooh.
But yes, so thank you for joining us for this episode. Please do like, subscribe, and share, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear about your favorite final bosses. And we will see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye bye.